Okay, hello everyone, and thank you for joining. I am Leslie Regal, Assistant Vice President of Civil Aviation at the Aerospace Industries Association in Washington, D.C. It would be an understatement to say our industry is going through some severe turbulence, and I think our collective priority now is to ensure that our sector comes out of this crisis as strong as we were previously. This will require even more government and industry cooperation, and today we'll discuss a prime example of a partnership that continue to enhance global cooperation and hopefully enable a quicker recovery. It was 1 year ago, in coordination with this meeting, that the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, Department of Transportation, Federal Aviation Administration, Transportation Security Administration, Department of Commerce, and 30 U.S. industry partners launched the U.S. Southeast Asia Aviation Cooperation Program. This public-private partnership works with aviation stakeholders in Southeast Asia to design programs that promote technical, policy, and commercial cooperation in civil aviation. Although this rapidly growing aviation market has been momentarily sunk by the pandemic, this area is still rich in opportunity. In this panel, we'll discuss progress in the ACP and civil aviation development in this region. We are fortunate to have delegates from each of these government agencies and an industry representative with us today. So now I will introduce our panelists. First, Todd Abrajano, the Chief Operating Officer and Head of Agency for the US TDA. Mr. Abrajano leads the agency's export promotion efforts, supporting US jobs and businesses in priority development projects within emerging markets and the energy, transportation, ICT, healthcare, and agribusiness sectors. He previously served as acting deputy director and senior advisor to the director of the agency. Before joining USTDA, he served as the director of the Office of White House Liaison at the U.S. Department of Commerce, where he supported Secretary Wilbur Ross. Prior to this, Mr. Abrajano served as president of Turning Point Public Affairs, which he founded in 2010. Next, Dan Elwell, Deputy Administrator of the FAA. Mr. Elwell was sworn into office on June 26, 2017, following his presidential appointment. He also served as acting FAA Administrator from January 2018 till August 2019, although I'm sure that Dan felt like this was a much longer time than that. He previously served at the FAA as the Assistant Administrator for Policy Planning and Environment, and more recently, Senior Advisor on Aviation to U.S. Secretary of Transportation Elaine Chao. Dan also had senior positions within trade associations, Airlines for America, and the Aerospace Industries Association. He was a commercial pilot for 16 years with American Airlines and a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy. Keeping the Air Force together, we have Gary Renfrow, the Assistant Administrator for International Operations at TSA. Mr. Renfrow oversees the staff of international regional directors, TSA representatives, regional bureaus, pre-clearance mitigation operations, and a front office support staff in the US and over 20 countries around the world. Previously, he served as TSA Assistant Administrator for Domestic Aviation Operations. Also, he was Federal Security Director at Philadelphia International Airport and Deputy Federal Security Director at the Philadelphia and JFK airports. Mr. Renfrow served 29 years with the U.S. Air Force as a Special Operations Commander. Next, we have David Short, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Aviation and International Affairs at the DOT. Mr. Short was appointed to his role in July 2018. He had responsibility for implementing economic and competition policy in the aviation and international transportation sectors. He serves as the designated federal official responsible for the National Advisory Committee on Travel and Tourism Infrastructure and the Department's Advisory Committee on Human Trafficking. Before joining the administration, Mr. Short served as Senior Counsel, Trade and International Affairs for FedEx Express. Prior to FedEx, Mr. Short served as Director of the International Air Transport Association Legal Department in Geneva, Switzerland. Previous to this, he practiced aviation law firms in New York and DC. Rounding out the panel, we have Ms. Kathy McKenzie, who is Vice President for Sales, Asia Pacific at GE Aviation. Ms. McKenzie was appointed to this role on June 1st, 2019, leading overall customer relationships and deal strategies for the Asia Pacific region. Ms. McKenzie has a long and impressive career within this company, holding a variety of roles in product management, commercial sales, and service and customer support. She has a Bachelor of Science and Master of Science degrees in Mechanical Engineering from Northeastern University and MIT, respectively. So before we get into the questions, I'm going to open the floor to each panelist to discuss first the US Southeast Asia Aviation Cooperation Program and any input they might have to add on innovation and cooperation in the area, including, of course, the impact of the pandemic. So I think it makes sense to start with Todd to discuss the U.S. Southeast Asia Aviation Cooperation Program and how the U.S. TDA works with the ACP to promote aviation infrastructure development.
Thank you, Leslie, for the question. I first want to extend a special welcome to my fellow panelists. We all work very closely together to strengthen aviation safety and security around the globe and to promote the best that America's companies have to offer. Dan, Gary, David, Kathy, thank you all for being here, and it's great to share this panel with you. It's also my honor to lead a part of our federal government, the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, that lends special strength and support to the aviation ties between the United States and Southeast Asia. For those of you not familiar with U.S. TDA, our agency is dedicated to supporting the development of infrastructure projects in high-growth emerging markets like Southeast Asia. We achieve our mission primarily through grant-based support for technical assistance and feasibility studies that provide our overseas partners with the comprehensive analysis they need to move infrastructure projects from concept to financing and finally implementation. Under the administration's Indo-Pacific strategy, US TDA is helping to create lasting partnerships in infrastructure sectors that are strategically vital to our overseas partners and to the United States. These include energy, transportation, ICT, healthcare, agribusiness, and of course, aviation. At last year's Indo-Pacific Business Forum, US TDA launched the US Southeast Asia Aviation Cooperation Program along with 4 US government partners and 30 US industry members. We call it the ACP, a public-private partnership that brings together the best of US public and private sector innovation and closely collaborates on civil aviation development in Southeast Asia. US TDA supports the ACP with a full range of program tools. I want to take a moment to thank my government colleagues for their commitment to making the ACP a real success, including the U.S. Department of Transportation, the Federal Aviation Administration, the Transportation Security Administration, and the U.S. Department of Commerce. In fact, I understand that FAA Administrator Steve Dixon spoke earlier this evening about U.S. engagement in aviation in the Indo-Pacific, including the ACP. This public-private partnership could not happen without the private sector and the work of companies like GE Aviation and their help to distinguish this program from the traditional models of aviation sector assistance. The U.S. Southeast Asia ACP is based upon our successful aviation partnerships around the world, like in China, Brazil, and India. The U.S.-India ACP, for example, which we established in 2007 with the FAA and India's Ministry of Civil Aviation, is really the bedrock of our aviation engagement in India. Over the past 10 plus years, the India ACP projects we have funded range from work on aviation safety to demonstrating the efficacy of airport body scanners to sustainable master planning for airports. Later today, we will announce that we will fund an innovative executive development training program for India's next generation of aviation leaders, and that represents the kinds of public-private partnerships that US TDA excels at creating. The training will be provided by a series of American companies that have revolutionized the global aviation industry through their innovation and know-how, including Boeing, Honeywell, KPMG, and Landrum & Brown. The American Association of Airport Executives is one of our key partners in this training initiative, as is the Transportation Security Administration. I can't imagine a better team of partners for this initiative, and I can't wait to see what else we can achieve in our aviation partnership with India. In addition to this training, US TDA is supporting India's efforts to better manage its airspace to meet what we know will be the dynamic demands of the future. Specifically, we are funding a comprehensive roadmap and implementation plan that will strengthen India's systems for air traffic management and for communications, navigation, and surveillance. This project will have a positive impact for millions of people who fly over India's airspace every day. Our local partner for this project is the Airports Authority of India, which selected Boeing to perform the assistance made possible by US TDA. We have every reason to believe that when air travel starts breaking records again, India will be more than ready to take to the skies and help lead the way. Finally, US TDA is committed to hosting the next US-India Aviation Summit, which we hope and trust can take place late next year. We will again bring India's senior leaders from government and industry to the United States and engage a deeper dialogue of cooperation, shared experience, and solutions for aviation's most pressing challenges now and in the future. We believe that this next summit, the seventh of its kind, may well be the most important of all. Aviation finds itself in a very different world today than it was just only a few months ago. So this is a critical conversation that we look forward to having. I very much hope and look forward to seeing many of you in Washington, D.C. next year for that event. Thank you so much, Leslie.
Thank you, Todd, for that overview. Now over to Dan to cover the topic of developing a seamless airspace in the Indo-Pacific region and any other opening comments you might have.
Thanks, Leslie. And hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to speak on this panel as we celebrate the one-year anniversary of the U.S. Southeast Asia Aviation Cooperation Program. And thank you to the government of Vietnam for hosting this event. I am happy that FAA Administrator Dixon and I were able to participate virtually. And as the administrator said earlier in his remarks, COVID-19 has delayed our planned activities for this ACP, but we are encouraged that the U.S. Trade and Development Agency has had several partners submit valuable proposals that we are now in the process of coordinating for delivery. Of course, in the middle of this global health crisis, all nations are reassessing the true needs of this industry as we develop and implement tactical and strategic measures to help recover, maintain, and advance a seamless global aviation system. And our ACPs, particularly in this region, offer us an excellent starting point for the discussions that lead to collaborative approaches to solving these complex programs, as do meetings like the Indo-Pacific Business Forum. And you have our commitment that maintaining and strengthening ties to partners in the Asia-Pacific region remains one of FAA's highest priorities. And the world has certainly changed since we signed this ACP. At the time, our optimism for growth was unbridled and for good reason. This region was one of the fastest growing in the world for commercial aviation until late February of this year. We went from a jet stream tailwind to a hurricane headwind with dizzying speed. It was an extraordinary, unprecedented set of circumstances, which will require from all of us an extraordinary response. And we've started to see some very slight recovery, but it's still going to be a long, slow process. Could take a number of years to get back to the volume of traffic we enjoyed just last year. And we know that the global aviation community will play a key role in the recovery of the world economy and each of our individual economies. And that is why it is so important that we work together and innovate together as we chart a course forward. And in a few minutes, I'll discuss how the ICAO Council's Aviation Recovery Task Force is addressing these very issues. And I'll conclude by reiterating what Administrator Dixon said earlier today. And when we collaborate and work together, we are more powerful as a force for change, and in this case, for recovery. By sharing our knowledge, information, and best practices as never before, we will not only speed the recovery of our industry, but will also provide for our citizens the safest, most efficient, and reliable air transportation system anywhere on the planet. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Dan. Now over to Gary for some opening remarks, and hopefully he can touch on some of the new innovation we are seeing throughout airports.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you to the panel as well. This is a wonderful opportunity, a critical part of the globe. So thank you for having me today. I've just been in this position for about 30 days. Coming again, as Leslie mentioned, from the domestic aviation operation. So perhaps I'll start with just talking about the evolution of TSA through this process. You know, I came out of the winter holidays having historic volumes in the United States, exceeding 2.7 million passengers screened each day from November through December. And worrying about a summer ahead, if you will, as January rolled around, about having enough people to get through the summer because of such growth. So we went from that to sometime in late February, early March, from 2.7 million to 8% of that at its lowest point. It's been a huge transition. It worked as a crisis from the beginning, but we've been very quick to try to pivot from time to time. Initially with the incident management group standing up, we looked very carefully at the people, the processes, and the parts at each airport, and as a system to try to minimize contact, provide for social distancing, reducing touch where able, but every time also providing for effective security. Pivot was they changed our standard operating procedures in many cases, again, to attempt to still provide effective security, but doing it in a different way. Use our equipment slightly different. So when you come up to a travel document checker, less touching, you'll now see plexiglass. You'll see that our officers are wearing PPE, the masks, the visors, the gloves. All of that has happened evolutionarily, if you will. First, it was optional wear, then it became mandatory wear. And as supply chains have permitted, more and more PPE was put in place until such a point that we feel like we have a safe environment for our officers to work. For people in the beginning, it was also about them staying home, and there was no need to have all these officers. I had quite the opposite problem that I had in December, where I was worried about the number of people. Now I had so many people, I had to worry about what to do with them. But those solutions came very quickly. One of the things we ran into early on is a realization that insider threat, for instance, is a greater risk when you have so much fiscal uncertainty, when you have people getting furloughed, hours reduced, just very challenged, and also ungoverned space as we closed up terminals and had less checkpoints open. So those kinds of things led us to take some of our folks and apply them to this insider threat. So more of that going on in airports, where we're doing random plays against different locations to make sure our employees, as well as the passengers, are safe and secure in the airport environment. So beyond taking care of people with PPE and using them differently, we also, one other thing, we reduced wait time to the extent that we can. As we got a safer environment, a cleaner environment in checkpoints, more PPE, and started bringing people back into the work environment, we were able to apply them to open more lanes than we typically would have had to reduce the dwell time in the checkpoint. And this was our administrator's objective, is to reduce the risk at the checkpoint to the maximum extent, not just the risk to security, but the risk in the face of safety concerns. The next pivot point, if you will, is to look further in the future now. And as a new norm of providing a clean space, a cleaner space throughout the airport for the long term, sort of raising the bar on standardization, as well as sort of a new priority. We've always looked at things like a bit more effective and faster equipment, but now the third criteria being safer, reducing touch, providing for distance, self-service, and those kinds of things. So from the very beginning of our process, which normally starts at the ticket document checker, we have what's known as the credential authentication technology, which takes a driver's license. Originally, it was envisioned as being simply a better way of checking identities. This is a process where if you're doing thousands in a day, human error takes its toll. And so the machines now, the technology allows us to take a driver's license and do a better job, more effective job on authenticating or validating that driver's license. With COVID, it gave us an opportunity to also do this in a touchless fashion. So we've simply turned the equipment around so that the passenger themselves can apply their identification. The officer can see it, their face and confirm on a screen that it is indeed them. And it's also vetted real time through what's known as our secure flight system for any watch listing. From there, they normally move on to what we call the advanced imaging technology, or AIT. That's the body scanner. And then the first thing we did was to change the process so that while we had this opportunity and space in the system, if you will, slack in the system, was to allow people to enter that piece of equipment more than once. Before, it was a matter of going to a pat down. We obviously want to reduce those kinds of things right now. So while we have capacity, we simply send them back through the equipment, asking them to divest whatever was in their pocket or whatever's coming up on there, and give them a second opportunity to do that without the pat down. The next piece of equipment that's important is the X-ray, which we're already in the process of replacing with the CAT, or the CT, the computed tomography equipment, which is more effective for sure. The other opportunity space here, though, is to reduce bag checks. So it's not only more effective, but it reduces the touch, if you will, of another officer having to go through that process. As we look even further downstream, so these are things already underway. We really see this this period of time now as opportunity space. TSA is a government entity. We plan on continuing, not just continuing, but accelerating our technology deployment, our advancements. Whereas before we were going to take several years to do this, we're actually pushing the timeline to many well now, and advancements in the advanced imaging technology. So all three of those pieces of equipment we're pushing very quickly. And beyond that, we're looking at standoff potential. There's a through vision opportunity that essentially shows a presentation based on it's not thermal, but indeed it shows like a person to remove it, and it's testing right now. The other opportunity space I think is in the way of biometrics and digital identity verification. So in the United States, there's a lot of digital driver's licenses coming to become reality. More and more, that's going to become an opportunity space for us. I think the digital travel cards is internationally is something that's being looked at. There's great opportunity there. We know there are privacy concerns. TSA is working hard with some partners in order to make sure that it's a safe way to process and get identity, get good security, and yet preserves the privacy of individuals. I think all of these things represent a real opportunity space. So elevating security, elevating cleanliness, reducing contact, that's good for the passenger, it's good for business, and it's good for security. So I think that's a win-win-win. And thank you very much for giving me the time this evening, Leslie. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Hopefully we're not getting the same glitches I was during some of the presentation. But now I will turn it over to David for any opening comments and discuss market opportunities and development of an ASEAN single aviation market.
Okay, thanks very much. First, let me say congratulations to the organizers of the Indo-Pacific Business Forum, and thanks for including me on the panel. It's really an honor to be here today and to participate with all of you. The launch of the Aviation Cooperation Program has been an important and appreciated development to launch a wide series of cooperative programs across the entire spectrum of civil aviation. While its first year hasn't gone exactly as planned due to COVID-19, the timing is still fruitful, as recovery in the aviation industry will require closely coordinated efforts between the US and Southeast Asian governments and industry partners. I look forward to seeing the results as we work together and further develop our strong aviation partnership. Regional cooperation is nothing new to Southeast Asia. The progress made on the ASEAN Single Aviation Market, or ASAM, since its inception in 2007 has been truly commendable. ASAM provides a cohesive aviation market under a unified set of modernized rules that allow airlines to more easily operate and expand within the ASEAN region. The integration and ratification of ASAM protocols by the member states has been a slow but progressive process. Excessive protectionism remains an obstacle to realizing the true potential of a single aviation marketplace. I hope that as the aviation industry recovers from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, the member states will accelerate their efforts and work together to achieve this goal, which would allow airlines necessary flexibility and greater opportunity to better serve the region and beyond. On that note, I believe connectivity between the United States and ASEAN will recover and grow in a post-COVID aviation market. I am confident Southeast Asia will get back on track as one of the fastest growing regions for air transport. And I hope that the same will be true for the US ASEAN market, which was expanding at record levels just prior to the pandemic. Our governments are committed to supporting the growth of aviation in the region through regular technical engagement. The Department of Transportation leads a US government delegation with our Federal Aviation Administration and Transportation Security Administration colleagues at the ASEAN Air Transport Working Group, or ATWG. The ATWG provides a great opportunity for subject matter experts from aviation authorities all across ASEAN and their partners, including the United States, to meet, discuss, and promote aviation policy and programs. One way our collective governments can help bolster airlines' recovery and growth in the region is to make the necessary policy and regulatory changes that harmonize airlines' operating environments for international services. This would allow airlines from both within and beyond Southeast Asia to better serve the region's global needs. Removal of outdated or restrictive regulations will enable the aviation sector to meet today's global needs and will better facilitate the growth of air services to match the varied demands of the traveling public. This next step has become that much more important as carriers recover in a post-COVID world and require maximum flexibility to recuperate based on each individual carrier's unique situation and needs. Speaking for the Department of Transportation, we are ready to work together with our regional counterparts and other stakeholders to achieve these goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Finally, Kathy, any opening comments you may have, which are focusing on how the industry is coping and adapting to this pandemic?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on the panel and letting me represent the industry and GE in particular. You know, it's just 9 months ago, the fundamentals propelling the growth of this industry were robust. Incomes were rising, nearly 160 million people a year were entering the middle class, and by far the majority of those were in Asia. And as people entered the middle class, discretionary spending increases. And in this era, people tend to spend their extra money on experiences, and that includes travel. So concurrent with the rising incomes, the desire to travel and see the world, new generation of aircraft were more cost efficient. They allowed point-to-point travel. No longer did people need to travel through major hubs that added hours to your travel time. The industry revenue growth was spurred by the ease of travel and the affordability. But then, as we mentioned, you know, sometime in beginning in late January, really culminating in April, the unthinkable happened, and this is absolutely a watershed moment in this industry. More than half the aircraft in the world were grounded. And those few aircraft flying had very few people on them. There were hundreds of airports around the world with 0 people in them. Airline revenues have dried up. They have had further cash challenges from passengers demanding refunds for canceled flights. And although there's been some recovery since those low moments in March and April, for instance, in August, there was some recovery. The passenger demand, though, was still down 75% year over year. The available seats were down 64% year over year. And forward bookings are down nearly 80% as we look towards the end of the year. In fact, about 60% of all tickets are booked within 10 days of travel. And this makes it nearly impossible for an airline to plan any reliable flight schedules. But specific to Asia Pacific, approximately a third of all departures in the pre-COVID environment were international in this region. And because the international borders across Asia have essentially been closed since March, the recovery has been really challenging. As of today, the number of daily departures is down across the Asia Pacific region, is down 55% a year ago, and the international travel is down by more than 70%. We are seeing some recovery in markets that have a strong domestic market, such as Vietnam, Japan, Korea, India, Malaysia. These are all strong domestic networks. The airlines are recovering, but their recovery ebbs and flows with the outbreak of the virus. There's a direct correlation with the number of confirmed cases and passenger demand. As cases go up, passenger demand goes down, and you can chart it. There's other airlines in the region like Singapore Airlines, Hong Kong's Cathay Pacific. They're dependent on international business travel with essentially no domestic travel. Both these carriers are well run. They have the support of their governments, and they'll pull through. But not having that domestic network to rely on is particularly challenging for them. But what they have done in many airlines in the region and across the globe, they've converted their passenger aircraft to cargo operations. Before the crisis, 52% of the world's air cargo, was actually carried on the underbelly of commercial aircraft. And now with those aircraft out of service, the cargo capacity is about a third of what it was a year ago. I'm sorry, it's down a third from a year ago. And the airlines are taking advantage of this and flying their commercial aircraft with no people, but full of boxes. Many use the underbelly, some load packages on seats, and some airlines are removing the seats altogether from the cabin. It's a source of revenue, but it barely breaks even the cost of a flight. So in addition to some of the basic revenue challenges, there were many airlines in the region who were undergoing restructuring. There's several national carriers in the region, such as Thai Airways, Malaysia, Garuda. They're undergoing significant reorganizations that started well before the crisis. Governments are offering financial support in the forms of loans, guaranteed back loans, or direct support. In general, across the region, consolidation plans have been put on hold, and new aircraft deliveries are being renegotiated with Boeing and Airbus every day. But the region is still robust. We've got airlines like AirAsia, Lion Air, Vietjet. They've accounted for so much of the region's growth in recent years. They're in a slightly better position because of their cost structures and because they have a really strong domestic network in their operations. But it's a challenging time. I think it's important to note that Asia Pacific will come through this challenging period probably better than most aviation markets around the world. There's unique factors here in Southeast Asia. I talked about some of them: the rapid growth, the growth of the middle class. There's a lot of investment, a lot of new entrants, and it's a really dynamic market. So what's propelled Asia Pacific forward over the last decade, I'm confident the region will work through this and resume its global leading growth. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Kathy. Very helpful comments, and we're seeing the same thing across all of our industry. Okay, so now I think we can move on to some more specific questions for our panelists. Let's start with Todd. First question, how can US and Indo-Pacific governments work with industry on new aviation projects?
Well, Leslie, under the ACP, US TDA is developing a robust program to address the aviation safety, security, and infrastructure priorities that the countries of Southeast Asia set for themselves. And we are proud of what we do to connect our respective aviation sectors. For example, on November 17th and 18th, if you're in the United States, or November 18th and 19th, if you're based in Southeast Asia, US TDA and FAA are co-hosting a webinar series that will cover several critical and timely themes, including maintaining safety at an airport during construction and best practices for airport rescue and firefighting. Both themes reflect key concepts of airport management as airport operators in Southeast Asia look to expand existing airports and build new ones. Our local partner for both days is Indonesia's Directorate General of Civil Aviation, with whom US TDA has worked closely on improving flight safety and navigation. They will open each day with an overview of airport development in the region, and participants will have the opportunity to hear from expert speakers on practices that they can utilize as they construct new airport facilities, as well as how to protect passengers and airport staff by establishing a dedicated fire brigade at the airport. US TDA has also funded a series of reverse trade missions that will, when international travel is possible again, bring aviation officials, including airport operators and aviation security stakeholders, to the United States to meet with their US government counterparts, to tour aviation facilities, and to see firsthand the latest US equipment and solutions for their top aviation priorities. One of the visits will bring delegates from across the Indo-Pacific to TSA's International Design Symposium, where TSA will present on the latest developments in airport checkpoint design. And in Vietnam, US TDA has funded an airport management training program, which will provide technical, managerial, and operational training to Vietnam's airport operators. FAA will provide training in both Vietnam and the United States that will focus on topics including airport design, airport planning, slot management, and airport collaborative decision-making. We'll be working closely with the Airports Corporation of Vietnam to make sure that that training is tailored to Vietnam's specific needs. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much. Next question for Dan. There's been a lot of efforts in activity restarting the commercial aviation sector. I'm sure you're spending a lot of your time doing just that. What would you say the FAA's focus is right now to strengthen the global aviation system?
Oh, thanks, Leslie. That's a great question. The U.S. has had a strong and leadership position at ICAO with regard to restart and recovery plans and guidance for commercial aviation. We've offered our expertise and our medical, flight medical, and public health doctors have joined in the discussions. And the ICAO's, the Council's Aviation Recovery Task Force was first formed in March of this year, and we're calling it CART 1, presented its report on June 1st. And that was designed to provide nations with a template for how to restart and to work towards the recovery for their primarily the passenger travel. And we built this coalition, 25 countries, probably half a dozen or more industry associations and trade groups that got together to write this guidance called the Takeoff Guidance for Recovery. It was designed under ICAO's auspices to be sort of a living document, and we knew from the beginning that we would meet again, and we did. About a month and a half ago. We reconstituted the CART, as we call it, and we're now working on CART Phase 2. The big difference with this collaborative effort is that these discussions are going to be focused very strongly on testing regimes, testing, quarantine, public health corridors, as we're calling them. And basically what we're doing is we're getting together with public health officials from around the world, US CDC, European CDC, WHO. And what we're developing for the nations is a basket of measures that will be helped with lots of data on what constitutes risk and the kinds of risks that are presented by varying levels of prevalence of COVID-19, what the different tests, whether they're antigen or PCR, what risk reduction those tests would provide if they were given to passengers within 48 hours of departure. We're presenting lots of different scenarios because every country has a slightly different paradigm to deal with when it comes to COVID-19. The charter that this group has and that we're committed to is to encourage the resumption of international travel while keeping it healthy and safe. And as you can imagine, it has a discussion like that has its challenges. But the public health corridor concept is very intriguing. It's in this area in Southeast and in Asia writ large. They've already started a number of these sort of bilateral public health corridor agreements. I know New Zealand and Australia started one recently, and it has already experienced some of the challenges that come with those agreements. But the good thing is that wrinkles will come about when these sorts of agreements are go into practice. But we know enough now to mitigate. When we discover these issues, we mitigate them, we fix them, so we can keep pressing on. So we hope to be finished, as I said, by the end of October, and we hope to be able to present to countries around the world guidelines. These are not mandatory. These are not blanket dogmatic requirements, just guidelines, a basket of measures, if you will, for countries to use to agree on bilateral or multilateral travel arrangements. I think it's going well, and hopefully within the next month or so, we should start seeing a definite uptick in travel, particularly within the regions and the areas where COVID-19 is on the downward trend.
Thanks, Dan. I think we're all hoping for that progress. Next question for Mr. Renfrow. What are TSA's efforts in regards to public-private partnerships?
Yeah, thank you, Leslie. Hopefully you can hear better. Well, first of all, we're very interested in private public interaction. We've been very successful at this so far through a part of our organization known as the Innovation Task Force. I think the best example of how this can work are the automated screening lanes, or the ASLs as we call them. And this is where a company like Delta Airlines, for instance, or even an airport can purchase equipment that's been tested and certified by TSA for use, but that is better for the customer and it's better security. Some of the advantages to this equipment right now is that we have improved article control. More than one person at a time can divest at a time. So it's less serial, if you will, in the process. It has automatic diversion of bags. So when your accessible property comes through and it gets highlighted for additional search, it automatically gets diverted for that search. And they have automatic bin handling, which is really helpful right now during COVID. So just simply less touching of those bins will be very helpful. And part of the process we look forward is, there might be opportunity to actually use UV in the process of that to sanitize or microbial antibacterial kind of bins. So I think that's a very good example of how we've done private-public interactions. We look forward to doing more of that. Some of the other things that they've talked about is some of the touchless fingerprinting. The biometrics that I mentioned earlier, a lot of work being done on that in cooperation also with our other government partners with Customs and Border Protection. So we're very interested in it. And great success with the ASLs. Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. Next question is to David. How can the United States and ASEAN work together to bolster their air transport relationship?
Sure. Well, I think we have established a good relationship so far with our engagement in the ASEAN Air Transport Working Group. From DOT's perspective, continued dialogue in that forum is important to provide a vehicle to exchange views on the necessary policy steps for regional harmonization. I think we will be successful with further strong commitment from ASEAN towards that goal and our own strong commitment to support ASEAN in its endeavors. I know FAA and TSA are also strongly engaged in the region as well on safety and security measures, although I will defer to them to speak to the specifics.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to Kathy. From the perspective of a global company like GE, can you tell us how important it is, the Indo-Pacific partnership to global aviation?
Oh, it's tremendously important. When I speak of APAC, I'm referring to 23 countries. There's 14 different time zones in 15 different languages. There's 254 airlines in this region, and just about all of them are our customers. This region makes up about 25% of the GE or CFM order book, and today there's 2,200 aircraft in Asia Pacific are powered by the GE engines. And that number will double to 4,200 with the orders that are on backlog. Our largest customers in the region are AirAsia, Lion Air, Indigo, Vietjet, Jetstar. And if you look at market projections for the next 20 years, Asia Pacific is expected to be one of the biggest markets for new commercial aircraft. The airlines from this region are also industry leaders, and they're major players on the world stage, shaping the industry's approach on emissions and climate change, air safety and security, traffic control, aftermarket and business support models. With the rapid growth in this region, it has its unique challenges and idiosyncrasies. There's some big personalities running the airlines. There's substantial government involvement in bureaucracy, and there's steep competition. Many of the governments in the region, they look to aviation, the aviation industry as a key component of their economic growth. And they expect GE and other partners in the industry to participate beyond a traditional supplier-buyer relationship. So the importance of the region, though, doesn't stop with just our customers. We have a strong and deep parts of our supply chain are also in Asia Pacific. We do most of our final assembly in the United States and some in France for CFM engines. But there's a long sourcing tail behind every GE jet engine. We make more than 1,500 parts here in Asia Pacific at 23 different suppliers across 7 countries, and our buy every year has been increasing about 5% every year for the last 5 years. We also have a huge services footprint right here in Singapore. We have one of our global repair centers of excellences for critical engine components, where we're continuing to invest in new technology, particularly some additive repair technology. In Malaysia, one of our largest CFM and LEAP overhaul facilities. In Taiwan, we have a joint venture with EV Air at the Taipei airport, where we overhaul about a third of the world's CF6 and GNX engines. And then in Korea, we support the region with our unmanned support team. In the future, we'll have a joint venture with Singapore Airlines here in Singapore to support the GE90 and the 9X engine overhauls as well. So, and of course, we have our partners here, such as ST Aerospace, that are also based here in Singapore, and they do maintenance work on our CFM and LEAP engines. So, tremendously important region. Happy to be here. We're going to be here as it grows, and have played a big part. It plays a big part in our growth strategy as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Kathy. All right, I think that is about all we have, unfortunately. Thank you so much to the panelists. There was a lot to get through in this very short amount of time. I've learned a lot. I hope our audience has too, from the safety of their own home, office, or workspace. Although our industry has been heavily impacted by the crisis, and we've touched on this repeatedly, I think today shed a little bit of positivity into our future and what we can do within the international partnership in the future. So thanks again for allowing us to share in this successful anniversary.